Never thought the people sharing my blood would be the ones to stab me in the back. My name is Whitney, a 32-year-old woman sitting inside a rusty rented vehicle to execute a painful test of loyalty on my own family. Resting my heavy head against the worn steering wheel, I carefully inspected my exhausted disguise of a recently bankrupted person before stepping out into the freezing cold. I dragged my tired feet up the wooden stairs covered in thick snow toward the familiar cabin entrance. My movements came to a sudden halt when sharp whispers drifted through the slightly open front door. I froze in absolute shock upon hearing my father declare, with unwavering certainty, "Don't let Whitney know about the $1,500,000 we just received." My mother immediately agreed with a chillingly cold tone by suggesting, "Tell her that we are also having difficulties. Short?" My heart completely shattered into pieces when my biological sister delivered the final cruel blow by demanding, "Lock the door and don't let her come into the house." Standing alone in the freezing mountain shadows of Aspen, I could only form a bitterly cold smile, because those greedy individuals inside had absolutely no idea that my massive financial empire remained incredibly untouchable. If you are curious to discover how I completely destroyed their selfish illusions, please hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, along with sharing your thoughts in the comments section below. Standing completely paralyzed on the snow-covered porch of that luxurious cabin, I forced myself to listen closely to the muffled voices echoing from the warm living room. I needed to clearly identify the conspirators inside as my father, my mother, along with my sister, Sabrina. Hearing their familiar voices engaging in such a sinister conversation instantly delineated a permanent boundary between our previous family bond and the absolute greed they were currently displaying. My entire body shivered violently against the freezing mountain wind while I processed the horrifying reality unfolding just a few inches away from my hiding spot. Sabrina eagerly took the lead in this heartless discussion by pacing aggressively across the hardwood floor with a highly authoritative tone. She confidently manipulated our parents by stating that a newly bankrupt person like me would only drag the entire family down into a bottomless pit of endless debt. Her words dripped with calculated venom as she argued how they must completely secure the $1,500,000 for themselves instead of wasting a single dime on my supposedly failed corporate ventures. She ruthlessly twisted the narrative flawlessly by claiming that offering me any financial assistance right now would only encourage my allegedly irresponsible behavior. Sabrina insisted that this sudden downfall was my rightful karma for always acting so independent over the past decade. I desperately held my freezing breath while waiting for the people who raised me to defend their youngest daughter against such incredibly cruel accusations. My fading hope officially evaporated into the winter air when Dad merely cleared his throat, before firmly agreeing that their own financial security must take ultimate priority over my personal business mistakes. He proudly justified his ultimate betrayal by declaring they deserved to enjoy their remaining retirement years in absolute luxury without carrying the heavy burden of my sudden financial collapse. Mom immediately supported his selfish stance with a chillingly practical tone by suggesting they transfer the massive funds into a heavily guarded private account by tomorrow morning. She reasoned that maintaining absolute secrecy regarding this sudden wealth was the only reliable method to prevent me from begging for a desperate bailout. Their definitive and calculating agreement felt exactly like a massive bucket of freezing ice water splashing directly onto my face. This undeniable proof demonstrated that they were entirely willing to abandon their own flesh and blood during what they truly believed was my absolute lowest moment in life. They had effortlessly traded my well-being for the immediate comfort of protecting a massive pile of money they had somehow just acquired. The warm golden light spilling outward from the living room window suddenly looked sickeningly deceptive to my tear-filled eyes as the realization of their ultimate betrayal settled deep into my bones. I clenched my trembling fists tightly inside my coat pockets, trying to ground myself in this devastating waking nightmare. The final devastating blow to my thoroughly shattered heart arrived when heavy footsteps purposefully approached the front entrance of the cabin. I barely had enough time to press my trembling body against the frozen wooden exterior wall before the distinct metallic click of the heavy deadbolt locking echoed sharply through the quiet mountain air. That dry and ruthless metallic sound truly represented the ultimate physical severance of our biological family ties. It successfully transformed every single ounce of love or respect I ever harbored for these greedy individuals into a worthless pile of cold ashes scattered carelessly in the harsh winter wind. I realized in that exact moment that the loving family I grew up believing in was completely dead and gone forever. I slowly turned my numb body away from the glowing windows of that treacherous aspen cabin without making a single sound. Every single step I took away from that wooden porch felt significantly heavier than the last, as my heavy winter boots crunched loudly against the thick layer of fresh snow covering the pathway. I finally reached the rusty rented vehicle waiting silently in the freezing darkness of the isolated mountain driveway. The profound emotional wound bleeding heavily inside my chest was already undergoing a drastic transformation by hardening into an unbreakable armor of pure icy determination. As I forcefully turned the ignition key to start the noisy engine, my mind began meticulously crafting a silent but absolutely unforgiving plan to completely obliterate their selfish illusions once and for all. The next morning arrived with a blinding sunlight piercing through the floor-to-ceiling windows of my genuinely luxurious corporate office suite located in downtown Denver. Settling comfortably into my genuine leather executive chair, I immediately bypassed the pathetic bankrupt persona from last night by picking up my secure business telephone line. I urgently contacted several highly trusted financial investigators within my elite professional network to meticulously trace the exact origin of that mysterious $1,500,000. My dedicated private wealth manager promised to utilize every available banking resource to uncover whatever hidden transaction Mom and Dad recently completed behind my back. Waiting for the upcoming investigative results felt like pure torture as my mind continually replayed their cruel words over and over again. Within less than 2 excruciating hours of waiting impatiently, a highly encrypted email containing official public property records finally illuminated my sleek desktop monitor. My blood ran completely cold as my eyes scanned the digitized county documents displaying a shocking truth I never could have anticipated in my darkest nightmares. The beautiful lakeside property left exclusively to me by my grandfather had somehow been officially sold to a wealthy out-of-state developer just 3 days ago. I had explicitly trusted my parents to simply maintain that cherished childhood estate, while I aggressively expanded my primary business operations across the country. Discovering another random stranger listed as the official legal owner of my most precious personal sanctuary made me feel intensely physically nauseous. This historic wooden cabin represented the only place where I ever truly felt unconditionally loved during my incredibly difficult childhood years. A sudden wave of pure adrenaline surged through my shaking veins as I forcefully dialed the contact number listed under the official notary public seal visible on the transfer deed. "You personally stamped a property transfer document for a woman claiming to be Whitney yesterday afternoon, without properly verifying her government identification," I demanded, with a barely controlled fury vibrating through my vocal cords. The terrified clerk on the other end of the line nervously stammered before frantically replying. "The older couple brought their daughter, who presented a perfectly valid state license matching your exact name and date of birth." I tightly gripped the edge of my mahogany desk while firmly stating, "That woman was Sabrina," using my identification. their office just legally facilitated a massive real estate fraud. Hanging up the phone abruptly, I realized the absolute sheer audacity of their meticulously planned deception to steal my massive inheritance. The devastating realization that my own flesh and blood deliberately orchestrated such a highly sophisticated criminal conspiracy struck my chest like a runaway freight train. They had not only callously stripped away my legal ownership rights, but also blatantly trampled over the most sacred memories I shared with the only man who truly believed in my ultimate potential. Every single fond recollection of spending peaceful summer afternoons fishing on that wooden dock was brutally overshadowed by their disgusting greed for unearned wealth. My biological family maliciously stole my personal sanctuary just to secure a massive payday, while simultaneously planning to lock me out into the freezing cold without any hesitation whatsoever. The despicable betrayal stung significantly worse because they deliberately weaponized my absolute trust to flawlessly orchestrate their ultimate thievery. Instead of immediately driving back up to that aspen cabin to unleash an uncontrollable screaming match, I aggressively forced my racing mind to remain absolutely focused and completely methodical. Throwing a useless emotional tantrum would only give those treacherous thieves an early warning opportunity to hide their newly acquired fortune before the federal authorities could officially intervene. I silently began downloading every single forged document along with the fraudulent transaction records from the county database directly into a highly secure encrypted flash drive. Gathering this undeniable mountain of concrete evidence was the absolute first step in preparing a fatally precise legal strike that they would absolutely never see coming under any circumstances. My profoundly shattered heart transformed into an impenetrable fortress of pure vengeance as I meticulously mapped out their impending financial ruin with clinical precision. They mistakenly assumed they had easily outsmarted a financially broken woman begging for their mercy on a freezing wooden porch last night. I fully intended to demonstrate precisely why building a massive financial empire requires a level of absolute ruthlessness they could never even begin to comprehend. 2 days later found me officially stepping inside that painfully familiar aspen cabin, wearing incredibly worn clothing to perfectly execute my pathetic bankrupt disguise for the final time. My ultimate goal during this agonizingly tense visit centered around desperately searching for a single shred of genuine conscience remaining within my biological family before dropping the curtain. Standing frozen in the middle of the luxurious living room, feeling completely physically exhausted, actually required very little theatrical acting after enduring such massive emotional trauma. I deliberately lowered my gaze toward the expensive hardwood floor while pitifully explaining my supposedly catastrophic corporate collapse to the very people who secretly stole my inheritance. The chilling silence filling the room after my desperate plea for help served as a terrifying confirmation of their deeply rooted selfishness. Mom immediately launched into a spectacular theatrical performance by clutching her chest while dramatically lamenting about their supposedly overwhelming mountain of unpaid medical bills accumulating over the winter. Dad quickly joined her highly deceptive narrative by heavily sighing about the constantly rising costs of local property taxes continuously threatening their peaceful retirement years. They seamlessly played the pathetic role of struggling elderly citizens desperately trying to survive on a limited fixed income while completely ignoring the stolen fortune sitting in their bank. Watching the people who raised me flawlessly manufacture such disgusting financial lies solely to deny their youngest daughter a temporary safe haven made my stomach churn with disgust. Their synchronized ability to look me directly in the eyes while weaving such elaborate falsehoods truly highlighted the terrifying extent of their shared sociopathic greed. Sabrina stood confidently near the blazing stone fireplace, with her arms tightly crossed across her chest, while actively delivering the most incredibly toxic, sarcastic remarks imaginable regarding my situation. You always arrogantly believed you were so much smarter than everyone else sitting in this room. Sabrina sneered aggressively with a maliciously triumphant smile permanently plastered across her face. She brutally blamed my sudden financial ruin entirely on my own reckless ambition, while loudly declaring that I was strictly forbidden from moving back into my childhood bedroom. We simply cannot afford to let your catastrophic business failures drag this entire family down into absolute poverty, she announced, with an incredibly condescending tone vibrating sharply throughout the cabin. Her complete lack of basic human empathy combined with that sickeningly superior attitude perfectly summarized the lifelong sibling rivalry she had always secretly nurtured. Summoning every last ounce of remaining patience within my thoroughly exhausted body allowed me to carefully present the ultimate psychological test regarding the beloved property my grandfather left exclusively to me. Could I perhaps stay at the lakeside cabin temporarily, just until I managed to secure a reliable new job? I softly pleaded with a flawlessly manufactured tremble echoing in my voice. Dad stared directly into my tear-filled eyes without blinking even once, before brazenly claiming that the entire historical estate was currently entangled in a highly complex legal dispute. He shamelessly lied through his teeth by aggressively insisting the state government had temporarily frozen the property access, preventing absolutely anyone from stepping foot on the premises. Mom quickly nodded in agreement while pretending to wipe an invisible tear from her cheek to further solidify their impenetrable wall of absolute deceit. Hearing them effortlessly fabricate such massive falsehoods concerning a property they had already illegally sold to a wealthy stranger completely extinguished the final flickering ember of familial mercy. I slowly turned around to exit the stifling warmth of that treacherous wooden house while carrying a profoundly strange sense of absolute serenity washing over my turbulent mind. The freezing mountain breeze hitting my face as I stepped onto the snowy porch felt incredibly refreshing because their unapologetic cruelty officially validated the brutal destruction I was preparing. Walking purposefully back toward my rusty rented vehicle confirmed beyond any reasonable doubt that these remarkably greedy individuals fully deserved the catastrophic legal humiliation rapidly approaching their unsuspecting doorstep. I silently swore a solemn oath right then to utilize every single ounce of my corporate power to ensure they eventually paid the ultimate price. That weekend officially marked the beginning of my ultimate retaliation when I arranged a highly classified meeting with my best friend named Bethany inside a secluded downtown coffee shop. She currently worked as an incredibly sharp corporate attorney, possessing unparalleled access to highly confidential financial intelligence networks across the entire state of Colorado. Handing me a thick manila folder filled with heavily redacted banking documents across the polished wooden table felt exactly like receiving the ultimate weapon of mass destruction. I carefully scanned the detailed surveillance reports documenting the exact financial trajectory of that stolen $1,500,000 currently sitting securely inside their shared banking account. My pulse raced with a dark sense of anticipation, while realizing my biological family was actively preparing to make a catastrophically arrogant financial blunder that would permanently ruin their selfish lives. Spreading the freshly printed property listings across the table revealed that Mom-Dad alongside Sabrina were aggressively pursuing the immediate purchase of a ridiculously extravagant mountain mansion. Bethany leaned forward with a fiercely professional expression before directly explaining the precise legal mechanics of their upcoming luxury real estate transaction. They recently signed a binding preliminary purchasing agreement requiring them to transfer the entirety of those stolen funds into a third-party escrow account by next Friday. Bethany stated with absolute certainty vibrating in her voice. I meticulously reviewed the highlighted contractual clauses before asking my brilliant legal advisor, "Will this massive monetary transfer trigger a permanent lock if we suddenly introduce the forged property deed evidence?" She confidently nodded her head while confirming that any active federal fraud investigation would immediately freeze the entire escrow balance indefinitely without any possibility of a quick withdrawal. According to the extremely strict state real estate regulations governing such massive luxury purchases, my treacherous relatives desperately needed to submit a massive non-refundable deposit to legally secure the property. Plunging their entire stolen fortune into that rigid escrow system meant they would permanently lose complete control over the money. The exact second the electronic wire transfer successfully cleared the banking network. The brilliant beauty of this specific retaliation plan was that it required absolutely zero illegal actions on my part because their own blinding greed would perform all the destructive heavy lifting. Our flawlessly coordinated strategy relied entirely on exhibiting supreme patience to allow their unquenchable thirst for wealth to comfortably guide them directly into a devastating legal slaughterhouse of their own making. Bethany finalized the necessary federal fraud reporting documents right there in the coffee shop, while we patiently plotted the exact chronological sequence of our impending bureaucratic assault. We fully intended to completely weaponize the American judicial system to deliver a crushing blow that would instantly obliterate their arrogant illusions of grandeur and leave them absolutely destitute. Every single piece of forged evidence was meticulously cataloged into a comprehensive legal portfolio, ready to be submitted to the local authorities at the perfect psychological moment. Agreeing upon this exceptionally ruthless yet entirely legal retaliation method provided my deeply wounded soul with an incredibly strange sense of overwhelming peace after enduring such massive emotional trauma. Leaving the bustling coffee shop behind felt like walking out of a highly classified military command center after successfully authorizing a devastating tactical strike against an unsuspecting enemy stronghold. I knew deep down that this calculated legal maneuver would permanently sever my biological ties while delivering a completely justified punishment for their unforgivable betrayal. I slowly descended into a terrifyingly absolute silence during the following days while constantly monitoring the digital tracking alerts Bethany securely installed on the county property registration database. Watching my greedy family happily orchestrate their own catastrophic downfall without needing to lift a single finger brought a deeply satisfying warmth to my heavily scarred heart. They were currently celebrating their stolen wealth inside that wooden cabin, while remaining blissfully unaware of the massive federal hammer hovering directly above their deceitful heads. The meticulously woven legal trap was now perfectly set in stone, while I calmly waited for my completely blind prey to eagerly step directly onto the fatal trigger. A week later arrived with an atmosphere of absolute arrogance, radiating from the prestigious downtown real estate office, where Mom-Dad, along with Sabrina, gathered to officially sign their newly acquired luxury property documents. They were completely drowning in an ocean of delusional self-importance, while happily exchanging highly ambitious remarks about their upcoming glamorous lifestyle upgrades. Sabrina aggressively snatched the golden pen from the mahogany desk, while confidently declaring, "This massive mansion will finally prove to everyone that we belong strictly among the absolute elite of this miserable town." Dad immediately nodded his head in vigorous agreement before enthusiastically adding, "We are officially leaving behind all of our pathetic past struggles to permanently embrace a life of absolute royal luxury starting today." Watching their repulsive celebration through the highly discreet private investigator footage streaming directly to my secure laptop filled my cold heart with immense satisfaction. Their unprecedented blindness reached an absolute breaking point during the exact moment they cheerfully authorized the irrevocable electronic banking transfer without displaying a single ounce of hesitation. They literally dumped the entire stolen sum of $1,500,000 straight into the rigid third-party escrow system to solidify their delusional dreams of endless wealth. Mom proudly handed the finalized wire transfer confirmation receipt to the smiling luxury broker while completely ignoring the monumental criminal fraud they had committed against their own flesh or blood. They truly believed this massive financial commitment successfully guaranteed their permanent ticket into high society while totally abandoning their youngest daughter to freeze in the harsh winter cold. The very instant my highly encrypted banking software displayed the official notification confirming their massive escrow transaction had successfully cleared the financial network, my meticulously planned retaliation immediately commenced. Sitting quietly inside my downtown Denver corporate suite, I mercilessly initiated the automated legal protocol Bethany had carefully prepared for this exact pivotal moment in our ruthless vengeance strategy. I aggressively submitted the entire mountain of indisputable forged signature evidence directly to the federal courthouse, alongside a highly detailed criminal complaint forwarded straight to the Internal Revenue Service. Every single fraudulent property transfer document previously executed by my treacherous relatives was now sitting prominently on the desk of a highly aggressive federal prosecutor, hungry for a massive conviction. My breathing remained perfectly steady while watching the digital submission progress bar reach 100% because their impending destruction was now completely entirely out of my personal hands. Relying heavily upon the overwhelmingly undeniable concrete evidence provided within my comprehensive legal portfolio, a highly respected federal judge immediately recognized the catastrophic severity of this massive real estate fraud. The presiding magistrate wasted absolutely no time before issuing an emergency judicial mandate authorizing a comprehensive criminal investigation into the blatant forgery surrounding my beloved grandfather's historic mountain cabin. This devastating legal decree included a merciless emergency injunction that instantly froze every single financial asset legally attached to the individuals actively participating in this highly orchestrated criminal conspiracy. The sweeping federal freeze mandate aggressively locked down their personal checking accounts, alongside the massive escrow balance they had just arrogantly surrendered to the luxury real estate brokerage firm. That massive financial deposit sitting completely paralyzed inside the untouchable escrow system meant my incredibly greedy family had officially violated the incredibly strict payment deadlines dictated by their purchasing contract. The luxury property sellers possessed absolutely zero legal obligation to grant any extensions to buyers actively being investigated by the federal government for committing a massive $1 million forgery. My treacherous biological relatives had unknowingly marched themselves directly into an inescapable legal death trap explicitly designed to utterly annihilate their entire future without offering a single avenue of escape. They were officially stranded in a terrifying financial wasteland, possessing absolutely no access to the stolen wealth they had so ruthlessly prioritized over maintaining a loyal relationship with me. The flawlessly executed bureaucratic assault guaranteed they would face the devastating consequences of their own sociopathic greed while remaining permanently locked out of the luxurious paradise they desperately craved. The next morning brought an unprecedented wave of absolute panic crashing violently through the thick wooden walls of that familiar Aspen cabin when Mom-Dad alongside Sabrina officially received their federal subpoenas. A highly intimidating courier aggressively delivered a terrifying legal notice explicitly confirming the luxury real estate company permanently confiscated their entire $1 million deposit due to blatant contractual fraud. The suffocating reality of losing absolutely everything they stole finally hit them like a massive freight train, speeding out of control down a steep mountain highway. Every single arrogant delusion of grandeur they previously celebrated completely vanished the exact moment they read the official federal seal stamped across the terrifying legal documentation. Surrounded by an incredibly suffocating despair, alongside the very real threat of impending federal prison sentences, my treacherous relatives frantically bombarded my personal cellular device with dozens of highly pathetic voicemails. Mom sobbed hysterically into the receiver while desperately begging for an immediate emergency meeting, secretly hoping they could somehow leverage my legitimate corporate business identity to miraculously escape this devastating legal nightmare. Dad even possessed the sheer unadulterated audacity to shamelessly request a massive private loan to hire a competent criminal defense attorney to aggressively fight the federal government on their behalf. They ridiculously assumed the vulnerable woman begging on their snowy porch last week would still willingly sacrifice herself to rescue them from the catastrophic consequences of their own sociopathic greed. I ultimately decided to orchestrate our final confrontation at a highly exclusive downtown Denver restaurant instead of revisiting the scene of their disgusting betrayal located in the snowy mountains. Arriving at the designated meeting location felt incredibly empowering because I firmly stepped out of a sleek chauffeured limousine, wearing a fiercely tailored designer suit exuding absolute corporate dominance. The pathetic bankrupt disguise I previously utilized was permanently discarded to finally reveal the incredibly successful executive who successfully orchestrated their complete financial annihilation without breaking a single sweat. Seeing their jaws literally drop toward the expensive carpeted floor when they recognized my overwhelmingly powerful aura provided an immensely satisfying vindication for my deeply wounded soul. Before their intensely confused minds could even begin processing my incredibly wealthy appearance, I mercilessly slammed a massive stack of forged property deeds directly onto the polished mahogany table. Did you honestly believe I would never discover how you illegally sold the cherished estate my grandfather left me just to steal $1,500,000? I demanded with a freezing tone, vibrating sharply through the quiet, private dining room. Sabrina sat completely paralyzed in absolute terror while I leaned forward to look directly into her trembling eyes before delivering the ultimate verbal execution. You arrogantly told Mom to lock the door and not let me come into the house when I supposedly needed your help the most. I reminded her with a ruthlessly calm expression, completely devoid of any familial mercy whatsoever. Dad explicitly commanded everyone not to let Whitney know about the money you just received, completely forgetting that the truth always finds a devastating way to eventually surface. I finalized while watching the last remaining drop of color completely drain from his deeply wrinkled face. Their complete psychological collapse materialized instantaneously through a highly visible mixture of profound public humiliation combined with a deeply suffocating sense of inescapable federal despair. The terrifying realization that they were comprehensively destroyed by the exact same daughter they ruthlessly robbed just a few weeks ago reflected clearly across their horrified facial expressions. They sat completely speechless while hopelessly staring at the undeniable forensic evidence, proving they maliciously forged my signature to steal a property meant to be my personal sanctuary. Every single selfish illusion of living a glamorous high society lifestyle instantly evaporated into absolute nothingness under the crushing weight of their impending criminal indictments. My meticulously executed retribution officially stripped away every single ounce of their stolen wealth while permanently trapping them inside a terrifying legal nightmare they could never possibly escape under any circumstances. Several weeks later officially marked the devastating conclusion of this treacherous family saga as Mom-Dad alongside Sabrina stood completely humiliated before a ruthless federal judge. The incredibly stern magistrate formally read the massive list of severe criminal indictments explicitly detailing their highly orchestrated real estate fraud alongside the blatant forgery of official notary documents. Standing silently within the crowded courtroom gallery provided an immensely satisfying closure as I watched the terrifying reality of lengthy prison sentences completely crush their previously arrogant spirits. Their incredibly expensive defense attorneys proved absolutely useless against the overwhelming mountain of undeniable concrete evidence I had meticulously provided to the aggressive federal prosecutors. The justice system was completely stripping away every single ounce of their false dignity, while permanently exposing their sociopathic greed to the entire world. The immediate financial consequences of their despicable betrayal struck with an absolutely catastrophic force, leaving them completely destitute within a matter of mere days. Not only did the federal government permanently confiscate the stolen $1,500,000 they desperately tried utilizing for their luxury mansion deposit, the aggressively unforgiving banking institutions immediately foreclosed upon their beloved wooden cabin located in Aspen to forcefully compensate for the massive legal restitution mandated by the presiding judge. Watching the local authorities physically escort my treacherous relatives out of their cherished mountain home, wearing nothing but cheap clothing, felt like the ultimate poetic justice. They literally sacrificed their youngest daughter to secure a luxurious early retirement, but ultimately received absolute bankruptcy combined with an inescapable criminal record instead. Despite their incredibly pathetic tears flowing freely while desperately begging for my miraculous intervention outside the courthouse steps, my hardened heart remained completely frozen in absolute indifference. I firmly stared directly into their terrified eyes without displaying a single ounce of familial mercy before silently turning my back on them forever. Walking purposefully toward my waiting vehicle symbolized the permanent severing of this incredibly toxic biological relationship that had only brought me profound emotional trauma. Refusing to offer them even the slightest hint of forgiveness was undeniably the most empowering decision I ever made throughout my entire professional life. I drove away from that depressing federal courthouse knowing perfectly well that my incredibly successful corporate empire would continue thriving brilliantly without their suffocating greed dragging me down. Before ending today's incredibly dramatic family story, please do not quickly click away, because we need to thoroughly discuss the profound psychological lessons hidden within this devastating betrayal. Speaking directly from my personal perspective as the creator behind Revenge Alpha, this particular narrative perfectly illustrates how blinding financial greed can easily destroy the most sacred biological bonds imaginable. We often grow up blindly believing that blood relationships guarantee absolute unconditional loyalty. But reality frequently demonstrates that immense wealth can easily transform beloved parents into unrecognizable monsters. Whitney executing such a flawlessly ruthless legal retaliation was completely justified because allowing toxic family members to comfortably escape the consequences of massive theft only encourages further psychological abuse. Sometimes choosing to permanently walk away from your own flesh or blood becomes the only viable method to successfully protect your own mental health alongside your hard-earned financial stability. This deeply emotional saga truly forces us to deeply reevaluate our own personal boundaries when dealing with incredibly toxic relatives attempting to exploit our vulnerabilities. If you suddenly found yourself standing in Whitney's incredibly difficult position, would you have utilized the federal judicial system to legally destroy your own parents for stealing your massive inheritance? Perhaps you might have chosen a slightly different approach to confront their disgusting deception without necessarily sending them directly into a terrifying federal prison cell. Please drop your brutally honest opinions down